The football season is officially over, and there's not a Bourne Blitz on a Monday edition of The Beat presented by the Waterworks. But it's not all bad news, America, because if you can't have a Bourne Blitz, you can have a Birm Blitz, and you can dive even further into the position reviews and previews. So welcome to a Monday edition of the Austin and Birm Show. He is Birm. He's going to blitz through some offensive tackle stuff as we shift our attention to the offensive line. And man, what a phenomenal Super Bowl it was.
Do you, like, there's a lot of times in my life where I think about like nostalgia and things that I miss from being a kid, or things that, like, weird memories that pop up. And as we were sitting on Sunday afternoon getting ready to record this, I thought about those commercials that used to happen after the Super Bowl ended, like the Sports Illustrated commercials, you know? Mm-hmm. Congratulations, Patriots fans. Your team just won the Super Bowl. Okay. And then they have it all ready for you. And it's like, and then you get to order all your commemorative stuff. And it was so smart to do that right then, you know, because when else, as an NFL team fan, are you going to order that crap, you know, except for when you've had 58 bourbons and your team just won the Super Bowl.
And you had to like pick up the phone to do it. You couldn't even order online.
Yeah, but you had that cool NFL helmet phone that you had ordered from the year before.
Yeah. Give me that Patriots windbreaker that says Sports Illustrated on it. I gotta have it.
I know we don't talk a lot about other media on this show, but I read Albert Breer's thing about Mike Vrabel the other day on Sports Illustrated, which was awesome. Yeah. And then I realized how awful it was, because the reading experience on the Sports Illustrated website was about the worst thing I've ever experienced. But like, so I feel bad because the work that Albert Breer did on that story, and Albert Breer is a Buckeye, you know, so people, I'm not trying to mock, you know, I'm not trying to knock the guy, because that
he didn't build their website.
Yeah, that work was incredible. Boy, that website was absolutely piss poor. I mean, every single block of text was broken up by ads. It was awful. Sorry. Anyway, let's talk about offensive tackles.
Okay. By the way, if you're missing Zach Bourne already, and I don't know why you know, that's not I miss him, even though I talk with Birm all the time and I love it. He will be at Roosters. We're going to have a different lineup there with both Bob and Jay-Z out tomorrow, unavailable on the report. Zach Bourne and Brad Robinson will be there. So we'll talk. I know Zach wants to break down the schedule. That's what he wanted to do on the Bourne Blitz today. Now that the dates are out, and Brad Robinson, I think, wants to talk desperately about special teams. So we will do that at the live show at Roosters, the Fun Casual Joint, later on Monday. You can catch that on 97.1 The Fan's YouTube channel, 10 TV YouTube channel, 10 TV Plus, or anywhere you're getting your podcasts. But if you really want to just dive into offensive line play, and more specifically tackles, well, we've got you covered with that right now.
Yeah, I think it's a place you have to start because this is where the offense is going to be built for Ohio State. I mean, I know there's all the conversation about Julian Saint, all the conversation about Jeremiah Smith and Bo Jackson and the running back questions and all that stuff. But as we saw in the last two games of the year for Ohio State this season, if you can't block the quarter, you know, if you can't protect, it doesn't matter. All the other stuff is irrelevant. The tackle situation is one that in the recruiting space has been a difficult conversation for the last 5-6 years. I mean, it's been Paris Johnson in 2020, right, was the last 5-star offensive tackle that Ohio State was able to sign, and that's a kid from Ohio. We'll talk a little bit about Sam Greer, who was in that conversation this year, did not finish as a 5-star, but certainly is one of the more imposing incoming freshmen that you're going to see at Ohio State. And for those of you who haven't actually seen Sam Greer up close, I'm excited for that to happen. But when you get a chance to look at this group, it's hard to look at it and see like guys that you consider real tackles. I mean, that's always been the rub in college football. There are so few true tackle bodies out there, and sometimes you have to just mix and match and try to get tackle play out of guard bodies, and that's what Ohio State has done in the last handful of years. But it turned out pretty well with Austin Sareveld and Philip Daniels in 2025 for the most part.
Yeah, I think the review portion of this, you can be glass half full or empty, however you want, because on the departures list, you have Ethan Onyanwa there. And we could say, well, Ohio State had to get creative. They had to shuffle around because we thought at this time a year ago, oh, there's a pretty good chance that Austin Sareveld might slide out there and be the right tackle. And then he became the left tackle. So that that's a real check mark in the positive column. I think his emergence was critical, invaluable, wound up being a necessity. And I think the way Philip Daniels played was wildly encouraging. That was not something in the transfer portal when we were looking at both Onyanwa's addition and Philip Daniels. Well, the clear-cut, no doubt starter was going to be Onyanwa, who was getting second-round grades from NFL draft evaluators at this time, could have gone to the NFL ranks instead of taking the NIL, an opportunity that Ohio State afforded him at this time a year ago. And it did not work out. We can start there, which is a little bit to your point, Berm, that it's difficult to find the true tackle bodies, and not just that they have the physical skills to play at tackle, but then the mentality, the technique. Like, I don't know specifically one thing that kept Ethan Onyanwa from fulfilling the expectations last year. It was probably a little bit of column A, B, C, and D. But that is the difficulty when you start talking about seven-figure valuations, not just for transfer portal players, but the high school recruits that you mentioned and five stars, where they are commanding that from day one. Not just Jordan Seaton, but there's a handful of guys in every single class that Ohio State have been involved with. And it's like, well, you're going to pay $2 million or $1.5 million or $1 million or whatever it is for someone who is going to need a year or two to get on the field. And now more than ever, Ohio State is saying, no, that doesn't make sense. But even still, the portal is a risk, and it did not pan out with Ethan Onyanwa.
I think it's really only a conversation that big, like, what are you willing to spend in the NIL space conversation? I think the answer has to be different at two positions, and tackle is one of them, and defensive end is probably the other. Like, you're going to pay for these guys eventually. So it doesn't make sense to just pay for them as high school seniors. That way you have a better chance of holding on to them long term. Is it make more sense to pay for them when they've proven what they can do in college? That's the rub Ohio State is trying to figure out. But when you look at this roster, you see guys like Austin Birm, who came in as a guard, Philip Daniels, who was recruited as a guard, Ian Moore was always a tackle, Deontay Armstrong, a tackle, I think. Carter Lowe played guard last year. Javon McFadden at 6'3" was taking reps at tackle, while Carter Lowe was playing guard. So, like, you just don't really know what you're going to get, as you mentioned, because the truth is, once you're put out there on an island, once you're put out there at left tackle or right tackle, you're not getting any help. And so it's an interesting problem that Ohio State has, but one of the answers they came up with years ago, and this started with Greg Studrara and then went on to Justin Fry, was that, hey, we're just going to find guys who can play all five positions, because you're looking for 6'5", 315-pound offensive lineman. If one guy happens to be a little bit longer, has longer arms, sure, then he can play tackle. If you have a guy that maybe is a little bit more stout or shorter arms like Luke Montgomery, maybe he moves inside and plays guard. I mean, Luke played tackle in high school, and Luke played tackle when he started at Ohio State. So, and then you have players like Philip Daniels, who, when he transferred in a year ago, nobody really thought about him as a tackle, even though that's where he played at Minnesota. Then you had guys like Justin Terry, who everyone, when he transferred in from West Virginia, thought, well, this is a guy who will be your depth piece at guard. And he ended up playing tackle last year. And then he transferred for some reason to Virginia Tech this year. So you just constantly are trying to mix and match. But what you have with this group is a lot of experience. You've got 34 games played, 14 last year for Austin Birm, played in all 16 in his second year, started 6. So, I mean, this is a guy who's already played over 30 games in his career at Ohio State. Carson Hinsman in the same boat. Luke Montgomery now approaching that. Like, you've got a lot of experience. And when you talk about guys like Jordan Seaton, and you say, well, maybe Ohio State could have gone out in the transfer portal and paid $2.5-3 million for 1 year for Jordan Seaton. Well, then you would have been forced to give up one or two of those other players that we're just talking about. So, like, there is a unfortunate,
or maybe all of them,
So, that's kind of the rub. But from an Ohio State perspective, like, you go into this season, I think, feeling as good about your current offensive line, top to bottom, 1 through 12, probably, as you have in years.
Yeah. And when you say true tackle bodies, I mean, on this list here, returning and with experience, and Ian Moore only started one game and then got in the half against Miami in the Cotton Bowl when Austin Birm was injured. Like, he's got to be the closest ideal of that, right? Which is why when we're doing the preview portion, It's like, okay, well, there is your tackle frame. He's got multiple years in the program now, and he's got a taste of experience. Again, a sample size of Purdue, we can make whatever we want out of that. Thought he really was impressive in the second half, being pressed into action against Miami, but that's still limited. However, that's enough to carry over, I think, into spring ball to say there's something here. And if you're going to put him, if Tyler Bowen is going to put him out there and let him compete for the starting job, then the spillover conversation becomes, what does that mean for Austin Sareveld or Phillip Daniels? And as I'm sitting here right now, it feels like Ian Moore needs to start for the betterment of the entire offense, but I'm not Ryan Day or Tyler Bowen, so my vote doesn't really matter. But I do think because of the things that you're outlining with Austin Sareveld and Phillip Daniels and their physical profiles and maybe what their NFL future would be, one of them probably needs to shift into the guard conversation, which we'll have later this week. My personal expectation would be that Phillip Daniels does that. And I don't know how much disagreement we have at that spot.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that there's any opportunity to really have vociferous disagreement because we don't know. I mean, the reality is if Ian Moore doesn't capitalize on the momentum he gained in the back half of the 2025 season and take that into winter workouts, then it doesn't matter, So we've certainly seen guys, Luke Montgomery's one who early on in his second year at Ohio State in the spring of his second year, where we felt like he was getting ready to make that jump. And that's what everyone was saying. And then it didn't happen. So if Ian Moore falls back and doesn't capitalize, then a lot of that conversation is moot. But your point is correct. He and probably Carter Lowe are the only real, what I would consider tackle bodies on the roster at this point. Carter's about 6'6", and he's thinned out a little bit from his high school days at Toledo Whitmer. He's probably in that 320 range, but he's got like the long limbs that you look at and you're like, okay, that's a guy who could probably play tackle. We'll see if Carter has the requisite upper body strength to be that guy. I don't know. That's heading into year 2, a big step for him. But ultimately, the structure of this entire offensive line is going to come down to what Ian Moore does this winter. Like, I don't think there's any debating that. If Ian Moore continues to rise up, then everything else becomes a lot cleaner, I think, because as you said, it's either Austin Sareveld or Phillip Daniels inside, then you've got Carson Hintzman and Luke Montgomery, and then you're done. And then you start to really feel good about your depth with Josh Padilla and Gabe Van Sickle, and even Deontay Armstrong heading into year 3. And again, I think that there's going to be a moment where Ohio State and the recruiting philosophy is put to task in this first season of Sam Grier, because when, he's an Ohio kid. Yes, you're not paying him the multiple millions of dollars that a guy like 5-star Jackson Cantwell was getting, or David Sanders the year before. But you're paying him enough money that you have to find out early if he's going to be able to be a tackle in the future for this program. And so he's almost, I think, by default put into the 2 deep at right tackle, behind whether I would think Austin Sareveld, because there's personalities, knowing those two guys. I think that there's a lot about them that are similar. I think if I was like forming a buddy system for Ohio State football this winter, I would have Austin Sareveld attached to Sam Grier's hip all winter. I mean, it'll look funny because Sam Grier's hip is about 4 inches taller than Austin Sareveld's hip, but what you get.
You just need to get steal from Saved by the Bell's playbook and have like buddy bands, brotherhood bands, we can call them, for Ohio State. So then it won't be at the hip; they can just have their wrists tied together, and there'll be some cool bracelets.
And if Austin Sareveld started to call Sam Grier Preppy right now, that would actually be pretty great. The program does rely a lot on nicknames. And so, Austin, I know your dad's listening. So, Mr. Sareveld, tell Austin to start calling Sam Grier Preppy. Okay. It's a Saved by the Bell joke, as Austin just outlined, but he did go to Akron Hoban. Okay. He is from a private school. That's Preppy. Let's call him Preppy.
Guess we need to find out Austin's middle name, because what if he's A.C. Sareveld?
Oh boy, that'd be pretty. Well, his father's name is Clay. There's at least an opportunity there that there's a Clay Jr. in the mix.
Boy,
that's all here
nor
there. Speaking of getting hopes up, do you have any idea how much better I feel physically right now than I did 3 months ago?
I have a pretty good idea, because I did a week in 180 as well.
It's really been great. I am in week 2 of maintenance mode. I'm feeling great. I'm smart. I'm making smart decisions. Even on Super Bowl Sunday, I didn't go crazy. I had a plan. I had chicken tacos, a couple, not a lot. I wasn't diving into the pizza and the chili and all of the other stuff that was there, the chips and the nacho cheese dip. I can, because Awaken 180 has given me the opportunity to regain control of my health. I'm eating a lot smarter. I can mix in the things I want because I'm in maintenance mode, because I made it through the 8 weeks of the plan. I lost 35 pounds in those 8 weeks. I'm under 200 pounds for the first time in 25 years. I feel great. My joints feel great. Everything is great. Awaken180weightloss.com is where you can go to get yourself on track to regain control of your health the way I did, the way Austin did, and the way plenty of others have. Awaken180weightloss.com is a great place to take control.
Your body has changed and seasons change as well, but comfort, that absolutely does not. Call the Waterworks and Hetter Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing for maintenance, installation, and repairs, or visit online at thewaterworks.com. The Waterworks and Hetter Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, a proud sponsor of Ohio State Athletics. So you touched on these winter workouts and how important they can be for Sam Greer. The Sean Washington transfer from Dartmouth, almost came out of nowhere, Birm. What can you tell people listening to the beat about that acquisition?
He's an Ohio kid, and so that opened the door for the Buckeyes. He's from Springfield. He's a guy that the Buckeyes thought was productive at Dartmouth. Again, it's Dartmouth, so you're going to look at it and you're going to say, well, I don't know. And I can understand the skepticism. People will look at it probably in a similar vein to the way that the Vic Cutler transfer was a couple of years ago, where you're looking just to get someone who's played some college football, has experience, provides some depth, whether that's at tackle, which I think is where he's going to start, or whether it's inside. He's like a 6'4.5", 6'5", 310 pounder. So, prototypical size of what Ohio State's looking for. But obviously the competition level is not the same. I think what he provides Ohio State really is some insurance in the event that you don't get the continued growth out of Deontay Armstrong, which I think is an important piece of this conversation this offseason. It's interesting. Deontay, his twin brother Devontae, did transfer out, as you can see here. He was probably more of a guard anyway, but I did include him on the tackle list just because I felt like it was necessary to bring up the decision that this pair made to separate, essentially, when they never really intended to. And I think that speaks volumes to Deontay Armstrong and what he believes still he can accomplish at Ohio State, but also in an offseason where Ohio State was willing to shuttle off 30-plus kids. The fact that they went to the bat to keep Deontay Armstrong, I think, is fairly telling, because he's a guy that could be starting at 100 programs around the country right now.
When you look at the moves that Ohio State made or didn't make, and you outline some of the complicating factors with that financially in the development piece, do you agree with the choices that Mark Pantoni, Tyler Bowen, and Ryan Day made at this point to not be more active in the transfer portal? Because to me, I think it made logical sense, and I don't have any issue with it.
Yeah, it makes perfect logical sense. It doesn't make emotional sense to people who watched Ohio State's season get derailed because of poor offensive line play in 2 halves against Indiana and Miami. So I think I understand the visceral reaction to say, well, this is how the season ended. How can you just stand pat here? But that's the way offensive line play is. It's a developmental position. It's about experience. It's about opportunity. And there is the fact, as we already said, if you went out and spent major money on a player like Jordan Seaton, who I completely understand why people want you to, because he is a top 5 type NFL draft pick. But if you brought in Jordan Seaton and that forced you to not be able to keep Carson Hinsman or Austin Sareveld or Luke Montgomery, then all of a sudden, then you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is the big picture worth the small picture? And I don't think that it is. I think Ohio State's focus on the offensive line should be and should always be adding key pieces to the offensive line if they're available. But I don't know that other than Jordan Seaton, who really was an available piece in the transfer portal that was better than anything Ohio State has. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend I went through all 4,000 transfers, but I don't think that Ohio State believed in any way that anybody other than Jordan Seaton would have been an upgrade over what they have. And I don't disagree with that. I think offensive line play is still best served by developing a player in your program. Sure, there have been Seth McLaughlin, there's Jonah Jackson in the last 7 years, but other than that, from an offensive line perspective, and I guess Philip Daniels is maybe going to put himself into that conversation as being a true win out of the transfer portal. You can go position by position for Ohio State over the last 7 years and find winning transfers at every position fairly consistently. Offensive line is a crapshoot. It's always a crapshoot. Like that is the nature of the position. That's why you have 16, 17, 18 players on your roster who are offensive linemen, and then you hope you find 7 of them that can play. Like that's even guys that Ohio State spent years evaluating, and then you hope that 45% of them turn out the way that you believe they would. So do I think Ohio State could have improved by spending a lot more money on Jordan Seaton? I think it's possible. Is there any guarantee that would have actually led to Austin Sehraveld and Carson Hinsman and Philip Daniels and Luke Montgomery on the same offensive line as Jordan Seaton? I don't think that's a guarantee. So until you have that sort of guarantee, I don't think it's even worth the discussion. But yeah, the Buckeyes want to get better. Like that is the fundamental thing that I think a lot of times people assume that they're comfortable just standing pat. Every day, it's how does this team get better? What can we do to get better? And so every decision has to be looked at through that lens. And if they aren't sure that it's going to make them better, then they're just not going to do it. Like that's and love them or hate them for it. Like that is the approach. If they are not going to do things that they aren't sure of the result.
And I certainly understand the perspective that, because I personally am looking at it from those first 12 games, undefeated, and especially what happened in the Big House. That was the best offensive line performance we had seen in years, arguably. Now, I know that they won a national championship before that, but it didn't feel like that was all based on road grading and perfect protection and flawless performance in this snowy rivalry game. So I don't want to throw all of that away because there were obviously deficiencies and inconsistency and struggle against Indiana and Miami. And I understand the viewpoint that counters that. So, well, those are the 2 best defensive fronts, aggressive schemes, athletes that they played all year, and they came up short. How can you stand pat? Well, I don't know that betting on development is wrong. The foundation and the experience that the rest of that group accrued, and even including Tegra Shabola, like it's possible that Ohio State could have made a case to say, well, if Tegra wants to play one more year, he can and is willing to come back, and they'll pay for that. And I don't know that's the one spot, the one starter, obviously, that Ohio State lost, where you'd say, well, that could cost you Josh Padilla, Gabe Van Sickle, or Ian Moore. And if that was a 3-for-1 proposition in terms of finances or playing time, I think that was probably fair. Don't dispute it. But they could have made a case to go the other way. And I think they could have made that passionately, that you have another 9 months for all of them to go into the weight room. You have all of that body of work and starts experience at the Big Ten level. And you've heard this before from Ryan Day and others, that you learn through failure. Like, you're not gonna just get better without facing some adversity at some point. And so again, that's not a guarantee either. But Austin Sehraveld, Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, Philip Daniels all saw areas that they were going to have to improve for Ohio State to get to a national championship level. And the knowledge of that, I think, is more likely to pay off for them than throwing X amount of dollars in a huge bag at someone outside the program who didn't maybe take that same journey or have those same scars going into the future. And that might sound like too much of the psychological breakdown piece that and vibes that people don't like when I look at those, but that's part of the development process that's separate from Mickey Marotti or Tyler Bowen or anything else. And I think it's a smart bet. I don't have any issues, I said over and over, whatsoever with that. And I don't think that those 2 halves of football that you mentioned should erase everything else that came over the previous 11 and a half months of growth and development and productivity throughout the regular season. That counts too.
Yeah, and the future development and the next 10 months of development. I mean, that all matters. But I mean, again, from the fan perspective, it is easy to look at it and say that wasn't good enough. And I think that means, and we haven't mentioned the name Tyler Bowen in 25 minutes of this show, but like he is going to be tasked with fixing this and making sure that doesn't happen again when Ohio State plays talent equated games or talent, because now there's a blueprint of, okay, well, this is what the Ohio State offensive line did not handle, because you had 12 games against, pretty decent teams in the middle of that. Some, those were good teams in Illinois and Texas and Michigan. And like, those are good teams. They were not Indiana and Miami, and they certainly are not what we expect out of 2026 Texas or 2026 USC or Oregon or Penn, Indiana, everything else Ohio State has to play. But it's on Tyler Bowen now. And for a guy, Ryan Day took a bit of a leap in hiring an offensive line coach that had not coached the offensive line in 7 years. He did that knowing full well that he would have Charles Dickey and Marcus Johnson to help Tyler Bowen along the way. I think that was a good system last year for Ohio State. Marcus Johnson is gone. He's now the offensive line coach at Arkansas. You bring in Arthur Smith, who is an offensive line guy. And so I think you're going to see a real change in philosophy back to what we saw out of Chip Kelly and Justin Fry in 2024 for the offensive line this year. I think it's going to be a much more technically sound offensive line. But I mentioned in the wide receiver preview that I thought maybe Cortez Hankton might have more pressure on him than any first year coach in America this year to replace a guy like Brian Hartline. But the pressure on Tyler Bowen to get this right this year, when you have 4 returning starters and all of this experience and a Heisman finalist quarterback and the best player on the planet, Jeremiah Smith, and 1,000-yard freshman running, like, the offensive line cannot be a weak spot this year. And there are no pieces in place that would make you think it will be. And so anything other than a Joe Moore finalist type offensive line performance by Ohio State this year is going to be a disappointment. And I don't know that there is a way to sugarcoat that. Because Ohio State clearly was content with what they had coming back and said, hey, we believe in these guys. We believe in Tyler Bowen. We believe that him and Arthur Smith will be the perfect pairing to get us back to where we were offensive line wise. And so I really think Tyler Bowen has a ton of pressure on him this year to get it right. And his career as an offensive line coach, I think, is like kind of in the spotlight this year.
Yeah. On the line.
Yeah.
On the line.
Get it on the line. Thanks for watching this on the line.
That's right. Again, no Bourne Blitz has started. I don't know if Zach wants to double back around later in the week. We'll ask him when we get to Roosters, because he will be on the live show along with Brad Robinson. So we'll have that later on Monday afternoon
on the line.
On the line, and we will have a Talking Tuesday. As far as I know, Adam the King is not moving, so we'll have television's Adam King.
Probably is he at the Super Bowl or something. I'm sure. Did 10 TV send him to the Super Bowl just to like have his quaff out there and on the West Coast? I'm surprised he's not, or he's not in wherever the Olympics are.
He just goes wherever he needs to be at whatever time. And
hey, did you ever watch the Olympics when you were a kid? Like, did you like the Olympics?
I did when I was a kid. I'm not really as engaged with them as an adult.
Yeah, but why? I'm having the same sort of crisis of identity. I used to love the Olympics when I was younger, and now I can't even bring myself to give like a flying about it. Like, I don't. It started on Friday apparently, and I had no idea. Do you think this is because of streaming services that people don't care anymore?
I do think that the time shift has something to do with it, and we're all used to, for sporting events, them being live, and there are ways that you can certainly do that. But I wasn't going to watch like curling at 4:30 in the morning as much as I love curling. That's actually the only Olympic sport that I've watched probably in the last like 10 years. But I'm not waking up early to do it. And a lot of these results are immediately online. If I care about them, I'll find them. And It's sad. Life changes, man.
It's like the Pro Bowl thing happened last week, and now the Olympics. I'm like, man, like these were staples of my youth. These are things I loved as a kid. I loved the Olympics, and now I'm like, and I do think it's the streaming services, because growing up, I only had 3 channels, and like if the Olympics were on, it was on NBC or whatever, and I couldn't escape it. And now I can just turn on Netflix and watch, anything else. I could watch a guy climb a skyscraper,
Yeah. Which, how that's not an Olympic sport, I have no idea. It definitely should be.
Honestly, that's probably the way to get people back into watching the Olympics. Let's get a little bit more realistic. Let's have a skyscraper competition in the Olympics. And because we are heading as a society towards like a true Hunger Games, eventuality. And I figure maybe we don't need to have people fighting to the death on national television or on streaming services. But if they die falling off a skyscraper, well, that's not the same thing as fighting to the death. I think you should be disqualified if you kick a competitor off a skyscraper. I want to put that out there right now. I'm against it. I think that is you are not allowed to climb the skyscraper anymore, sir, because you knocked Tommy off and now he's splatted.
Splatted.
So I think there needs to be rules. I'm not saying we need to have a lawless Olympic game, but I think that some sort of Olympic game that involved a touch more, like the deadliest game component, Like,
what about if they had people try and catch the javelin?
Yeah. No, honestly, it's not a bad idea because you could wear a facial protector. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of chainmail, right? But like sprinting and having to like Willie Mays Hayes a javelin. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, we've really got there. I thought this would have been maybe a better conversation for the live show, which is a little more freewheeling and fun and casual. But instead, it's wrapping up an offensive tackle preview. I don't know how that happens, but I don't know how a lot of the things happen.
It's called a segue, okay? Because what it comes back to is this. If the Ohio State offensive line splats, it will start with the tackle splatting. And if the tackles splat, then the 2026 season's in trouble because the tackles must climb the skyscraper.
Yes, I knew I was able to finish your thoughts. At least I knew where that one was going. Thanks for joining us on a Birm Blitz on a Monday on the Beat presented by the Waterworks. We'll talk to you later on at Roosters. He's Birm. I'm Austin. See ya.